Hey folks, this is Gregory Robinson, author of Time Machine, coming at you from the mobile office, the Toyota Tundra here. And I wanted to talk to you today about effective communication. My grandmother, it was rumored back in the small town of Johnston where we grew up, had a nickname. She was known by some of the locals as the meanest white woman in Edgefield County. And my grandmother was not a mean woman. She was a sweetheart. But she did change her tact when speaking to someone when they didn't kind of get what she was saying. She died a few years ago, and my Uncle Billy spoke at her funeral. And he talked about something that she had taught her as a young man, which was you have to speak to people in a way in which they understand you. And he gave a couple of funny stories and examples of that, and wanted to share with you one of my stories where she kind of taught me that. So one day I was over at her house playing, and the phone rang. She answered the phone, and it was a short conversation, but she ended with, no, I'll take care of it. So she came over to me and said, Gregory, would you like to take a ride down to the pond? There was a pond about 3/4 of a mile south of the house. So I said, sure. She said, well, you go jump in the car and I'll be there in a second. So I get myself situated in the back seat of the car, and she comes out into the driveway carrying a shoebox. She got into the car, laid the shoebox on the passenger seat, and we went down to the pond. When we got down to the pond, she told me that I needed to stay in the car, and through the windshield I could see that there were a couple of guys out on the pond in a john boat fishing. She walked to the edge of the pond and she hollered out to them, asking, who gave you permission to be down here? Well, the guys kind of looked up from their fishing. They were about halfway across the pond. They saw that it was a little old lady, and they quite honestly turned right back around and went back to their fishing. So she hollered out to them a couple more times, who allowed y'all, or who gave y'all permission to be down here? And they didn't even turn around this time. They just ignored her completely. So she walks back to the car, pulls out her shoebox, sits it on the hood, and she pulled out of the shoebox a revolver. She walked back to the edge of the pond and she hollered out to them one more time, who gave y'all permission to be down here? And again, they ignored her. She then fired 2 shots into the air, and I'm going to tell you, that boat didn't have a motor on it, but there was a large wake coming off that thing from as fast as those guys were rowing. And I'm not at all telling people that you need to go out there and shoot at people that aren't listening to you, but you do have to speak to them in a way in which they understand you. So one example, or one thing that I hear over and over again, is parents. They get so angry they can't get their child to listen to them. And I want to kind of give you an example of that. So maybe a mother wants little Johnny to go and clean his room. She walks into the living room, and little Johnny's sitting there either watching TV or playing a video game. And she says, little Johnny, I need you to go and clean your room. He doesn't hear her or ignores her. And she says it louder the next time, eventually ending up in yelling at him and being completely frustrated by the situation. I want you to kind of think about it as a payphone call, okay? So you've got this idea or this thing you want to get across to your child. You effectively drop your quarter into the payphone. You walk into the living room. You're dialing the number. You say, little Johnny. Think of that as the phone ringing, okay? Now, most people will go, little Johnny, I want you to go and clean up your room. Well, you're starting to give the message before he's picked up the phone, all right? So you say, little Johnny. He doesn't hear you. That's one ring. You say it again, little Johnny. Think of that as the phone ringing. Eventually, he's going to hear you, stop what he's doing, and turn around and face you. Now, on some phone lines, we've probably all experienced this, there's a little bit of lag. So what I want you to do is count to 3. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. After he makes eye contact with you, you got to count to 3. Then you know he is completely engaged with you and is going to hear you. Then you tell him, little Johnny, I would like you to go clean your room. Now he's engaged with you. He has received the message. Let's look at another example. I hear it a lot. Wives saying the same problem with their husbands. He just never listens to me. Well, let's look at it in the same way. Because quite honestly, us men are just big kids. And I'm sorry, guys, but that's the truth. So I want you to, again, think about it as a payphone call. Now, if he's in the middle of watching the championship game and it's just gone into overtime, and you want to talk about your mother coming to visit the next week, might not be the greatest time. This is more of an important thing you want to talk about. You wouldn't do that on a payphone, an important conversation. You would wait until you had time at the house. So think about it as a payphone call. Once you drop that quarter in, you've only got a certain number of minutes that you're allowed to speak until you're going to have to add more money. So think about your timing when speaking to someone. Is this person in the middle of a big project? Is this person watching something that they're interested in? And I know this can be an annoyance. You're thinking, well, I shouldn't have to wait until he's got time to listen to me, whether that be the child or your husband. But quite honestly, this small annoyance in the front end can get you out of a big annoyance in the back end of them not listening to you. So I want to talk about one more example, and then I'll let you guys go. So I see it in business in a lot of the companies that I've worked for, ineffective communication between management and employees. I read a great article the other day that was entitled 9 Stupid Things That Make Great People Quit. And one of the things they were talking about was a behavior or an instance that happens with a single employee, and the way the company or management deals with it is they send out a mass email to everybody in the company stating a brand new rule. And of course, all this really does is avoid the conflict between the management and that one employee and their behavior. So this is something you see all the time with management. They avoid confrontation. Even in the Bible, it speaks about if you have a problem with a brother, you go to them in private. You speak to them about the matter. If that doesn't solve the problem, you bring someone of authority with you, but still you go to them in private and talk to them about the problem. Then if that still doesn't work, you bring it in front of the congregation. You bring it to everyone. But there's a progression here. The first and foremost is to go to them in private. And I know that is not a comfortable thing. We all try to avoid confrontation. We all want to just get along with everybody. But sometimes, quite honestly, you've got to pull that employee aside and you got to talk to them about their behavior. All sending that mass email out is going to do is going to damage your morale of the rest of the employees. They're going to think of you as, the Kaiser coming along, just placing a whole bunch of rules on them. If the problem's just one person and one behavior, address that one person and that one behavior. So again, you got to speak to people in a way in which they understand you. So when you do confront this employee, you want to talk to them, ask some questions about why they did what they did, what was their reasoning, and address it that way, rather than just coming in and blowing them out. Anyway, so I want you to all try that. Try to be more effective communicators. And I'm telling you, it will make your life so much better. This has been our Wisdom Wednesday. I hope you have a great day, and I hope the good Lord blesses you today. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you later.